The Crystal Cave by Mary Stewart, Book 2, The Falcon, 1. The first I knew of our coming to shore was being roused, still heavy, with that exhausted sleep, by voices talking over me. Well, all right, if you believe him, but do you really think even a bastard prince would be aboard in those clothes? Everything soaking, not even a gilt clasp to his belt. And look at his sandals. I grant you it's a good cloak, but it's torn. More likely the first story was true. He's a slave running away with his master's things. It was, of course, Hanno's voice, and he was talking in Breton. Luckily, I had my back to them, curled up in the welter of blankets. It was easy to pretend to be asleep. I lay still and tried to keep my breathing even. No, it's the bastard, all right. I've seen him in town. I'd have known him sooner if we'd been able to show a light. The deeper voice was Merrick's. In any case, it would hardly matter who he was, slave or royal bastard. He's been privy to a lot in that place that Ambrosius will want to listen to, and he's a bright lad. Oh, yes, he's what he says he is. You don't learn those cool ways and that kind of talking in the kitchens. Well, but the change in Hanno's voice made my skin shift in my bones. I kept very still. Well, but what? The weasel dropped his voice still further. Maybe if we made him talk to us first. I mean, look at it this way. All that stuff he told us, hearing what King Camlech meant to do and all that. If we'd got that information for ourselves and got a way to report it, there'd be a fat purse for us, wouldn't there? Merrick grunted. And then, when he gets ashore and tells someone where he comes from, Ambrosius would hear. He hears everything. Are you trying to be simple? The question was waspish. It was all I could do to keep still. There was a space between my shoulder blades where the skin tightened cold over the flesh, as if it already felt the knife. Oh, I'm not as simple as that, I get you, but I don't see that it... Nobody in Maridunum knows what he went. Hanno's whisper was hurried and eager. As for the men who saw him come on board, they'll think we've taken him off with us now. In fact, that's what we'll do. Take him with us now, and there are plenty of places between here and the town. I heard him swallow. I told you before we put out, it's senseless to have spent the money on his passage. If we were going to get rid of him, said Merrick bluntly, we'd have done better not to have paid his passage at all. Have a bit of sense. We'll get the money back now in any case, and maybe have a good bit over. How do you make that out? Well, if the boy has got information, Ambrosius will pay the passage. You can be sure of that. And then if it turns out he is the bastard, and I'm certain he is, there might be extra in it for us. King's sons or grandsons come in useful, and who should know better than Ambrosius? Ambrosius must know the boy's useless as a hostage. Hanno sounded sullen. Who's to tell? If he's no use either way to Ambrosius, then we keep the boy and sell him and split the proceeds. So leave it be, I tell you. Alive, he might be worth something. Dead, he's worth nothing at all, and we might find ourselves out of pocket over his passage. I felt Hanno's toe prodding me, not gently. Doesn't look worth much either way at the moment. Ever know anyone so sick? He must have a stomach like a girl. Do you even suppose he can walk? We'll find out, said Merrick, and shook me. Here, boy, get up. I groaned, rolled over slowly, and showed them what I hoped was a wretchedly pale face. What is it? Are we there? I asked in Welsh. Yes, we're there. Come on now, get to your feet. We're going ashore. I groaned again, more dismally than before, and clutched my belly. Oh, God, no, leave me alone. A bucket of seawater, suggested Hanno. Merrick straightened. There's hardly time, he spoke in Breton again. He looks as if we'd have to carry him. No, we'll have to leave him. We've got to get straight to the Count. It's the night of the meeting, remember? He'll already know that the ship's docked, and he'll be expecting to see us before he has to leave. We'd better get the report straight to him, or there'll be trouble. We'll leave the boy here for the time being. We can lock him up and tell the watch to keep an eye on him. We can be back well before midnight. You can't mean, said Hanno sourly. I've got something that won't wait. Ambrosius won't wait either, so if you want the money for that, you'd better come. They've half finished unloading already. Who's on watch? Hanno said something, but the creak of the heavy door as they pulled it shut behind them, and then the thudding of the bars dropping into their sockets drowned the reply. I heard the wedges go in, then lost the sound of their voices and footsteps and the noises of the offloading operation that was shaking the ship. The creak of winches, the shouts of men above me and a few yards away on shore, the hiss and squeak of running hawsers, and the thud of loads being lifted and swung overside on the wharf. I drew the blankets off and sat up. With the ceasing of the dreadful motion of the ship, I felt steady again, even well, with a sort of light and purged emptiness that gave me a strange feeling of well-being, a floating, slightly unreal sensation, like the power one has in dreams. I knelt up in the bedding and looked about me. They had lanterns on the wharf to work by, and light from these fell through the small square porthole. It showed me the wide-mouthed jar still in place, and a new hunk of barley bread. I unstopped the jar and tasted the water cautiously. It was musty, tasting of the rag, but good enough, and it cleared the metallic sickness from my mouth. The bread was iron hard, but I soused it in the water until I could break off a piece to chew. Then I got up and levered myself up to look out the porthole. To do this, I had to reach for the sill and pull myself up by my hands, finding a hold for my toes on one of the struts that lined the bulkhead. I had guessed by the shape of my prison that the hold was in the bows, and now I saw that this was correct. The ship lay alongside a stone-built wharf, where a couple of lanterns hung on posts. And by their light, some 20 men, soldiers, were working to bring the bales and loaded crates off the ship. To the back of the wharf was a row of solid-looking buildings, presumably for storage, but tonight it looked as if the merchandise was bound elsewhere. Carts waited beyond the lampposts. The hitched mules patient. The men with the carts were in uniform and armed, and there was an officer superintending the unloading. The ship was moored close to the wharf amidships, where a gangplank was. Her forward hawser ran from the rail above my head to the wharf, and this had allowed the bow to swing out from land, so that between me and the shore lay about 15 feet of water. There were no lights at this end of the ship. The rope ran down into a comfortable pool of darkness, and beyond that was the deeper darkness of the buildings. But I would have to wait, I decided, till the unloading was finished, and the carts, presumably the soldiers with them, moved off. There would be time later to escape, with only the watch on board, and perhaps even the lanterns gone from the wharf. And of course I must escape. If I stayed where I was, my only hope of safety lay in Merrick's goodwill, and this, in turn, depended on the outcome of his interview with Ambrosius. And if for some reason Merrick could not come back and Hanno came instead. Besides, I was hungry. The water and the hideous snack of soaked bread had set the juices churning in a ferociously empty belly, and the prospect of waiting 2 or 3 hours before anyone came back for me was intolerable, even without the fear of what that return might bring. And even if the best should happen, and Ambrosius send for me, I could not be too sure of my fate at his hands once he had the information I could give him. Despite the bluff which had saved my life from the spies, this information was scanty enough, and Hanno had been right in guessing, and Ambrosius would know it, that I was useless as a hostage. My semi-royal status might impress Merrick and Hanno, but neither being grandson to Vortigern's ally nor nephew to Vortimer's would be much of a recommendation to Ambrosius's kindness. It looked as if, royal or not, my lot would be with luck. Would with luck be slavery, and without it an unsung death. And this I had no intention of waiting for, not while the porthole stood open, and the hawser ran, sagging only slightly, from just above me to the bollard on the wharf. The 2 spies, I supposed, were so little accustomed to dealing with prisoners of my size, they had not given a thought to the porthole. No man, not even the weaselly Hanno, could have attempted to escape that way, but a slim boy could. Even if they had thought of it, they knew I could not swim, and they had not reckoned with the rope. But, eyeing it carefully, as I hung there in the porthole, I thought I could manage. If the rats could go along it, I could see one now, a huge fat fellow sleek with scraps creeping down toward the shore, then so could I. But I would have to wait. Meanwhile it was cold. I was naked. I dropped lightly back into the hold and turned to hunt for my clothes. The light from the shore was dim but sufficient. It showed me the small cage of my prison, with the blankets tumbled on the pile of old sacks that had been my bed, a warped and splitting sea chest against a bulkhead, a pile of rusty chain too heavy for me to shift, a water jar, and in the far corner, far meaning 2 paces away, the vile bucket still half full of vomit. It showed me nothing else. It may have been a kindly impulse which made Merrick strip me of my sodden clothes, but either he had forgotten to return them, or they had been kept back to prevent me from doing this very thing. 5 seconds showed me that the chest contained nothing but some writing tablets, a bronze cup, and some leather sandal thongs. At least I thought, letting the lid down gently on this unpromising collection. They had left me my sandals. Not that I wasn't used to going barefoot, but not in winter, not on the roads. For naked or not, I still had to escape. I had still to escape. Merrick's very precautions made me more than ever anxious to get away. What would I do? Where would I go? I had no idea. But the god had sent me safely out of Camlick's hands and across the narrow sea, and I trusted my fate. As far as I had a plan, I intended to get near enough to Ambrosius to judge what kind of man this was. Then, if I thought there was a patronage there, or even only mercy, I could approach him and offer him my story and my services. It never entered my head that there might be anything absurd about asking a prince to employ a 12-year-old. I suppose that to this extent at least I was royal. Failing Ambrosius's service, I believe I had some hazy idea of making my way to the village north of Carrick, where more of it came from, and asking for her people. The sacks I had been lying on were oldish and beginning to rot. It was easy enough to tear one of them open at the seams, for my head and arms to go through. It made a dreadful garment, but it covered me after a fashion. I ripped a second one, pulled that over my head as well for warmth. A third would be too bulky. I fingered the blankets longingly, but they were good ones, too thick to tear, and it would have been impossibly hampering on my climb out of the ship. Reluctantly, I let them lie. A couple of the leather thongs, knotted together, made a girdle. I stuffed the remaining lump of barley bread into the front of my sack, swilled my face, hands, and hair with the rest of the water, then went again to the porthole and pulled myself up to look out. While I was dressing, I heard shouts and the tramp of feet, as if the men had been formed up ready to march. I now saw that this had indeed happened. Men and carts were moving off. The last of the carts, heavily loaded, was just creaking away past the buildings, with the whip cracking over the straining mules. With them went the tramp of marching feet. I wondered what the cargo was. Hardly grain at that time of year. More likely, I thought, metal or ore, to be unloaded by troops and sent to the town under guard. The sounds receded. I looked carefully round. The lanterns still hung from the posts, but as far as I could see, the wharf was deserted. It was time to go, before the watch decided to come forward and check on the prisoner. For an active boy, it was easy. I was soon sitting astride the sill of the porthole, with my body outside and my legs gripping the bulkhead while I reached up for the rope. There was a bad moment when I found I could not reach it, and would have to stand holding myself somehow against the hull of the ship, above the black depths between ship and wharf, where the oily water lapped and sucked, rustling its drifts of refuse against the dripping walls. But I managed it, clawing up the ship's side, as if I had been another of the shore-going rats, till at last I could stretch upright and grasp the hawser. This was taut and dry, and went down at a gentle angle toward the bollard on the wharf. I gripped it with both hands, twisted to face outward, then swung my legs free of the ship and up over the rope. I had meant to let myself down gently, hand over hand, to land in the shadows, but what I hadn't reckoned on, being no seaman, was the waterborne lightness of a small ship. Even my slender weight, as I hitched myself down the rope, made her curtsy sharply and disconcertingly, and then, tilting, swing her bow suddenly in toward the wharf. The hawser sagged, slackened, drooped under my weight as the strain was loosened, then went down into a loop, where I swung, clinging like a monkey. It suddenly hung vertical. My feet lost their grip and slid away from me. My hands could not hold my weight, and I went down the ship's side on the hawser like a bead on a string. If the ship had swung more slowly, I would have been crushed as she ground against the wharf side, or drowned as I reached the bottom of the loop. But she went like a horse shying. As she jarred the edge of the wharf, I was just above it, and the jerk loosened by what was left of my grip, and flung me clear. I missed the bollard by inches and landed sprawling on the frost-hard ground in the shadow of a wall. And that is the end of Chapter 1.